What's up, Bio 2 students and fellow YouTube enthusiasts? Welcome to another edition of Purple Bear Biology. In this episode, what we're going to talk about is kingdom fungi. This kingdom is hugely diverse with lots of different organisms inside of it, so we're going to focus our conversation in on three main topics. One, we're going to talk about their morphology and what actually makes up the parts of a fungus. Two, we're going to talk about their life cycle so that we can understand how they complete their life cycle and what is unique to it. And then three, we're going to talk about the overall ecological impacts that some of the more important fungi have on the world around them. It's a super awesome topic, really cool. I'm excited to talk about it, so let's get started. Fungi are incredibly diverse and have expanded to inhabit most areas of the globe. While the requirements for fungi can be just as diverse as the fungi themselves, one thing that is pretty universal about the places they choose to call home is that they are moist environments. These include places like decaying trees, leaf litter, and even in some of the foods we eat. But what exactly is a fungus? Many of you may think of a mushroom when you think of a fungus, and indeed, this is part of a fungus. But this is actually a small part of the life cycle of a fungus. Mushrooms are just the fruiting bodies or the reproductive structures of a fungus and are primarily responsible for dispersing spores. Most of what is actually a fungus tends to be hidden under the ground or inside of the material that it's decomposing. An intricate network of tubes permeates through whatever the fungus is living in. Each of these tubes is referred to as a hyphae, and they make up the root-like network called a mycelium that expands the surface area of the organism to gather nutrients for growth and reproduction. Speaking of gathering nutrients, have you ever wondered how a fungus actually gets its nutrients and energy? They're sedimentary heterotrophs, and they have no internal digestive cavity. So how do they do it? They perform a process called extracellular digestion. Essentially, each hyphae secretes digestive enzymes onto its food. This liquefies it, and then it absorbs it back across the cellular membrane. Imagine if you consume food this way. It would be like if your skin cells secreted digestive enzymes onto your cheeseburger that you wanted to eat, and then it liquefied, and then you reabsorbed it across your skin. That would be one crazy way to consume food. Now that we understand where they live and how they gain their nutrients, let's explore their life cycle for a bit. There's diversity in their life cycle for sure, but we can use bread mold as an example. First and foremost, notice that fungi can have an asexual and sexual division to their reproductive cycle. This enables the fungi to live in the presence of other fungi to assimilate some diversity into their genome. But if they grow in isolated areas, they are still able to complete their life stages. A lot like mosses and ferns we discussed in previous videos, fungi have something called an alternation of generation to their cycle. The mycelia that we have seen are a haploid stage of their life cycle. When hyphae of two separate fuse together, we refer to this as plasmogamy. Plasmogamy is the fusion of the plasma membranes and not the genetic material of the different hyphae. Some fungi can live in this heterokaryotic state for an extended period of time, waiting for the right conditions to trigger the next step in their life cycle. When conditions are right, fusion of the genomes occurs and in a process called karyogamy. These diploid cells that form will then divide to create the fruiting bodies, or the mushrooms as we like to call them. The spores are created and dispersed, and then the cycle starts all over again. Speaking of dispersal, how do you think the fungus gets the spores away so that it doesn't have to compete with the parents for resources? Well, you might not be all that surprised by the mechanisms that are used. Wind will blow the spores. Animals often eat the fruiting bodies and then poop out the spores. And some even have the ability to build up pressure inside of the fruiting bodies and blast the offspring away. Okay, so that is all super cool. But why do fungi matter? Most individuals can answer that by stating that they're the masters of the decomposer world. Without these decomposers, the energy would remain trapped in the dead bodies like leaves and fallen trees. Also, don't forget that many fungi form symbiotic relationships with plants. These mycorrhizal fungi increase the surface area of the roots of the plant for nutrient and water absorption. Definitely not to shadow the importance of decomposition, but fungi are also influential from the pathogenic side. Let's talk about some fascinating examples. Dutch elm's disease is a fungus vectored by the elm bark beetle and has decimated elm populations without resistance. In some cases, it has completely eliminated elms from regions of the United States. But pathogenic fungi aren't just isolated to plants. We can find them in the animals as well. White nose syndrome is caused by a particularly insidious fungus that infects bats. The fungus grows and feeds on the bats and causes it to become restless during periods when it would normally be hibernating. The bats, as a result, often die because their metabolic rates increase when there is no available food in the wintertime. This fungus has been identified in at least 33 states in the U.S. and is responsible for millions of bat deaths, completely exterminating some of them from the area. Other animals that can be particularly influenced by fungi are amphibians because of their moist skin. Amphibian populations have been particularly hard hit by a fungi called chytrid fungi that lives inside the skin. The fungus results in a thickening of the outer layers of the skin, and the amphibians cannot accomplish proper water and gas exchange. A scientific paper published in 2007 described this species of chytrid fungi as the worst infectious disease ever recorded among vertebrates in terms of numbers of species impacted and its propensity to drive them to extinction. We as humans are not exempt from fungal infections either. Ringworm, thrush, yeast infections, and fungal infections around the nails, particularly on the feet, are all common. While these are not typically life-threatening, there are other infections that can occur in individuals that are immunocompromised that can be fatal without immediate medical attention. Now those all sound pretty bad, but don't forget that most of the fungal world is actually not a killer. In fact, we tend to rely on fungi for many things. In addition to symbiotic relationships discussed earlier, fungi are vital for making things like beers, breads, even flavors in cheese, and in some cases can even be life-saving when used to synthesize antibiotics like penicillin. Okay, so let's summarize what we learned in this video. First, fungi are incredibly diverse and have a really broad habitat range. However, they do rely on a moist environment because they start from spores. 2, we learned that they have an incredible life cycle that's a lot like plants with an alternation of generation, with 2 additional adaptations added to it. One is they have a stage called plasmogamy, where the plasma membranes of the 2 separate hyphae fuse together. And then they also have karyogamy, where the genetic information of those fused cells combine together to create a diploid organism. 3, we learned that fungi consume food through something called extracellular digestion. So as sedimentary heterotrophs, they have no internal body cavities, but still have the ability to gain their resources primarily through decomposition of external resources like fallen trees and leaf debris. 4, we learned that fungi can be devastating killers and have huge ecological impacts on the organisms around them. And then 5, though fungi often have devastating ecological impacts, they are also incredibly important in symbiotic relationships and in many of the products that we use every day. Well guys, that's it for this episode of Purple Bear Biology, where we explored the amazing kingdom of fungi. I hope you liked this video and learned something out of the process. If you liked it, go ahead and hit that like button below and subscribe so that you can see additional videos about biology that I continue to release. Y'all have yourselves a wonderful day, and I'll see you in cyberspace.